Hello, welcome to Hope Church Harrogate's Message of the Week. If you'd like to connect with us, please head over to hopeharrogate.co.uk/connect. We'd love to hear from you.
So this week we're reading from 1 Corinthians 12, verses 27 to 13, verse 13. That's good because that's not what I'm reading on there. That's what I've got here. Okay, I'm reading from the NIV. So if you have a different version of the Bible, there will be slightly different verses, words in there. So now, you are the body of Christ, and each one of you is a part of it. And God has placed in the church, first of all, apostles, second, prophets, third, teachers, then miracles, then gifts of healing, of helping, of guidance, and of different kinds of tongues. Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Do all work miracles? Do all have gifts of healing? Do all speak in tongues? Do all interpret? Now, eagerly desire the greatest gifts. And yet I will show you the most excellent way. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. But love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. And when I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now, we see only a reflection, as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now, I know in part. Then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love.
Hear me in a second. I'll keep talking so we can find the right level for this. I'll give this to you. Thanks. I'll stay still. So you may be familiar with this passage. You may have come across it once or twice before. If you've ever been to a wedding, there's a good chance you've heard it. But I want to draw out that Paul is talking in the middle of this letter to the Corinthians. So he's been talking about the body, and we heard Rachel talk about how that affects us in terms of generations and in different nations, and how we all need one another. And so that link at the beginning says that the body all has different gifts to bring, all has different aspects of God that are revealed through them. And so we all need one another, don't we? We all need one another's gifts. And so when you are fighting among one another because you think your gift is better than everyone else's, that's a problem. And so that's the context in which we hear this message about love, that love is far more important than whatever gift you have, And valuing one another's gifts is essential to being the family of God, to being a community of love, of people who reflect God in this world. And yet at the end, he says, so eagerly desire the gifts. And so really this is providing a foundation for how you are to be through your entire lives with one another. Once you've got that foundation in place, from there you can go, right, what gifts can I bring to serve the church? Because once you've got that foundation of love, then the gifts will do what they're meant to do, rather than actually bringing division, which they had been in the church. Now, I have a problem with the word love, and I'd like to go deep into language issues here, because we use love for a lot of different things in our modern context. You might say, I love pizza, or I love my bed, and really that has nothing to do with 1 Corinthians 13. You might even say, I love my wife, I love my kids, and to be honest, that has also sounds strange when you apply it to 1 Corinthians 13, because I could say, I'm so patient with you, I am so kind to you, I don't envy you at all. And that doesn't quite sound what I'm trying to communicate when I say I love you. Even saying I love Jesus sounds a bit strange when you apply it to this. Jesus, I am so patient with you. I'm so kind to you, Jesus. So it has to mean something different, right? If you come across the book by C.S. Lewis, The Four Loves, we've got a slide for this. He talks about 4 Greek words that they had for love. So very briefly, storge is the kind of natural love that parents have for their kids or families have for one another. Philia is a brotherly love, companionship. Eros is romantic love. And then agape is the word that we have in 1 Corinthians, which is a very self-sacrificial kind of love. And in kind of classical Greek, the word agape barely exists. It wasn't really something that Greeks spoke about in their literature at all, because it wasn't something they valued. It was seen as kind of foolish to show agape love. Why would you give to people who are not going to give you something back? If they're not your family, if they're not a romantic relationship, then agape love, why bother, kind of thing. And so for the New Testament authors to choose this word specifically because the other types of love that were written about didn't cover it, almost means that love is exactly the wrong word for us to use when we talk about what Paul's trying to describe here. Therefore, in my family, I propose that we don't use the word love anymore. I think it's confusing. We don't say that in our family. I also forbid telling the kids we love them, because I think it's confusing for them. We sing all the time, don't we? Jesus, I love you. We sing, I love you, Lord. I will love you, Lord, my strength. Beautiful one, I love. We sing it quite a lot. And so I would advocate that we ban all those songs as well, if that's all right. In my sort of half-formed thoughts about this, it was a year ago we were choosing songs, and that Jesus I Love You song was in there. I was like, should we actually, is it okay to say Jesus I Love You? It feels like that should be okay. But weirdly, in the Bible, you don't find anyone saying, I love you, God. I love you, Jesus. There's one example of Peter on the beach at the very end of the Gospel of John, where Jesus says, do you love me? He says, yes, I love you. That's the only example in the whole Bible. In the Psalms, no one says, I love you, God. And so it's just maybe saying I love you doesn't really cut it when we're talking about 1 Corinthians 13. And in our modern usage of the word love, I think we're so far away from what this means. What kind of love is it that is portrayed in the film Love Actually? What kind of love is portrayed in the very weirdly popular TV show Love Island? And what kind of love were they talking about in that 80s classic, Love Shack? I think we can all agree that the word is kind of tainted. And so should we agree that in this church, we won't use the word love anymore? That seems like the obvious solution. And yet, the words we have are the words we have, and we have to use them, don't we? We can't do that. It's going to be weird, and we're not weird. We just want to use words well, and we want to know what they mean. So we've heard as well, we have lots of nationalities and lots of languages among us. And so maybe your language does this better than English. But in English, I would say there are some ways in which when we say I love you, either to family and friends or to Jesus, that we can mean something really, really positive, and therefore we must say it, we should say it. And perhaps some of these definitions are what you have in your mind when you say I love you. Perhaps it means I really enjoy spending time with you. Or perhaps it means I value you in my life, I cherish you, I treasure you. Or it could mean that what matters to you matters to me. I'm committed to you. I want what is best for you. There are lots of positive things and very good things that we must say, I love you, because it reminds ourselves when we say it, this is what I mean. I don't really buy the definition of love being like, once you've experienced it, you know it. And therefore, if you don't know what love means, if you have to search for a meaning for love, you probably haven't experienced it. I think that's a really unhelpful thing to say, and don't do that. At its worst, when we say I love you, it is in our modern culture, this kind of, in our pursuit of authentic self and of only doing things that make you happy, then it is a very emotion-driven thing. When you feel that something is valuable to you, you go, oh yeah, I love it. But on a different day, when that feeling isn't there anymore, you go, oh, well, I don't love you anymore. It's a sad cause for ending of relationships all the time. And agape love advocates for something different. Our emotions are really helpful. And so often you will feel a deep, passionate desire to give and to sacrifice and to value the other. And those kind of transformation moments often come when we're deeply moved by something. And so I would urge you to seek and to hunger for those emotional moments. But it also has to be that even when we don't feel like loving, we still continue to give, we still continue to serve, we still continue to go again. If we have a good definition of love, it's also something that we can say not only to Jesus and to our families, but to our friends as well. And hopefully I can paint a picture of what that looks like. So to go to the passage again, we've got our list of things that Paul says love is and love isn't. And it's really interesting to note that the things that love isn't are kind of the list of things that Paul has told the Corinthians off for throughout his letter so far. And it's more of a set of behaviors, isn't it, rather than something you can do. You can't say, right, I'm going to love you now. In one moment, you can't do all these things. It's a way of life. It's a much more broad kind of philosophy and a much bigger attitude. It's also kind of personified in the language of Paul. Love it, not the person who loves is like this, but love itself is like this. It's a bit like Lady Wisdom from the book of Proverbs. You know, wisdom is a woman calling out in the street. Love is a person who does these things. We actually find this kind of in our modern language as well, that we have this concept that love is a thing. It's not about just a person who loves. Queen said, can anybody find me somebody to love? But then the Beatles went further and they said, all you need is love. It's not somebody to love. It's love itself. And love is a person. It's, in case you're wondering where Paul got this list from, he got it from looking at Jesus and going, This is exactly what Jesus was like and what he wasn't like. So, going through our list briefly. Patient. This is not about being able to wait a long time for things. This is talking about when you have the ability and the power to destroy your enemy, but out of love, you choose not to. You choose not to use your power to win, if you like, but to let justice work itself out. It is a picture of David in the cave with Saul, where Saul comes in. He's trying to kill David. He's just come into this cave where David happens to be. Seems like he's relieving himself or something. And David quietly cuts off the corner of his robe instead of killing him when he had the opportunity. Patience is David going, I could have killed you, but I'm trusting in God's timing and God's goodness that it will all work out. It is a picture of someone who is slow to anger, which is the description of God in Exodus. It is a picture of someone that is secure in their identity, that doesn't need to grab the things that are on offer to them, because they know, David knew he was going to be king someday because God has said it. Or a parent whose child's bad behavior seems like a constant challenge to their authority. The parent who just goes, no, I know I'm in charge, and I'm just going to love you no matter how bad you act. Kindness is about how you respond to someone who shows you hostility. So a lot of these words are about responding to that kind of situation. And when you're shown hostility, to return it with kindness is more than just being nice, right? It's about being a soothing balm to someone who is burning with anger. It calms down where there's conflict. It brings unity. Is Jesus responding to Peter's denial by telling him he's loved and he's important for his mission? It is Jesus responding to his disciples' power grabbing by gently correcting, not telling them off. It is Jesus who responds to the crowd who crucify him by saying, Father, forgive them. And actually submitting to the crucifixion when he had the power to not if he didn't want to. Envious. We've just been looking at the body being many parts, and the eye cannot say to the ear, I don't need you. It's wanting the best for one another. And there are kind of two ways which envy comes out. It's when someone else has something that you want, you can either bring them down by just, cutting their legs out from under them. We probably all have that happen to us. Or you can elevate yourself to be up with them. Oh, you've got that. Oh, by the way, did you know I've got this? We don't need to do that, do we? But it's so natural so much of the time. Boastful. It seems like the Corinthians have been boasting in their gifts of knowledge and tongues and prophecy. That's what we see in this passage. And there are lots of ways in which we can accidentally kind of boast. If we find we're constantly telling stories about ourselves, about things that we've done, like name dropping in stories is a little way that we can be boastful. Or just telling stories about your kids, how great they are, because that kind of reflected glory makes you look really good. Or how your team or how your group have done this amazing thing to give yourself that extra bit of credibility. Or it can be even boasting about other people in front of them, to other people, to try and make that person like you. There's all sorts of ways which we can boast. And it really fits in the next one, proud as well, that it's just becoming puffed up was the word that has been used earlier in the book as well. He's drawing that link in. The person who's become an expert already and therefore no longer needs to be taught anything, has no more to learn. William Barclay was a 20th century theologian. He said, true love is far more impressed with its own unworthiness than its merit. Recognizing how much you need is far more valuable than recognizing how much you've got. This dishonoring one kind of has a meaning of someone who's inappropriate. We read not long ago about the women who were supposed to cover their hair when they were at the front of church. And that seems like, in that context, everyone knew that women should have their hair covered. That was just appropriate. If you turn up to a wedding wearing shorts and t-shirt, that's inappropriate. That's just not done. That's causes offense to people. It could also be kind of a sexually inappropriate thing as well. And we've definitely seen cases earlier in the book of some sexual inappropriateness going on in their church. They, in fact, celebrated the man sleeping with his mother-in-law, just in case you'd forgotten that one. Self-seeking seems to be a really core one. Again, it's in the middle, which is always significant. And pretty much every week we've said, so what is this passage about in 1 Corinthians? It's all about laying down their own rights, their own permissions, their own things that they knew that were entitled to for the sake of loving others, to elevate other people over themselves. And so they're kind of competitive tongues, where they're all speaking in tongues louder than one another, or setting out communion and then using it just to get drunk themselves, or eating the idol food even though they knew it offended someone else's conscience. It seems to be the root of most of the Corinthians' problems, that they were trying to serve themselves rather than others. And it's, whenever we have problems in our lives, tends to be the root of our problems as well, right? That we're trying to serve ourselves rather than others and God. It's ultimately exactly what Jesus was not, right? That he was willing to give up his very life to serve his enemies. You've got not easily angered. Again, it's how you respond to people who are hostile to you. Do you respond to hostility with hostility or with kindness? Keeps no record of wrongs. It doesn't mean it forgets all the wrongs that's happened to it. We have to remember these things well. That means that our past hurts don't define how we act now, and don't define how we'll act in the future. It's about not becoming bitter, and the only way we can do that often is by the grace of God. It doesn't delight in evil. And again, they were celebrating the sexual immorality of the person within the church. Look at that person. He's got absolute freedom. You go. Are we entertained by violence? They would have had a Colosseum where people were thrown to the lions. And would they go and watch that and celebrate the bloodlust and be entertained by it? I think we have many modern equivalents in, I don't mean to bash Love Island today, but in watching people make terrible decisions and enjoying watching them suffer the consequences of that is maybe not something that Paul is saying is a wonderful thing. When people make bad life decisions because we know we're not supposed to do that, I'm going to watch someone else do it and enjoy vicariously watching them do that. I think that's another way that we can do that. Do we really value righteousness and justice? And then protects this. There's a translation question, but I think it's really in the Corinthian context where there were brass makers. And so there's quite a few things in this passage that Paul is really speaking to that context. He talks about the resounding gong, because there would have been a hammering of brass would have been predominant over Corinth, and they would have all known what that sounds like. And here it seems like this protects all is a symbol of a well-made brass jug or jar or container of some kind. It holds well. It is trustworthy. It will keep confidence. It is faithful. It will bear weight. It can do its job well. There are no leaks in it. And then finally, perseveres, really pairs with the patient at the beginning. Where patient is about those who have the power to change their circumstances but choose to trust the timing of God. This perseverance one is more like Mary, who from the first story we hear of her is that she's confused and probably terrified, but treasures these things in her heart. Right through to where she's standing at the foot of the cross, watching her son be executed. And she doesn't turn away, she doesn't run, she doesn't cry out to God, you've abandoned him, you're terrible. She just suffers and endures and remains faithful through whatever life has thrown at her, which is quite a lot in her case. And all of these things really point to life in the Spirit. This is the Spirit-filled church we've been looking at. And if you kind of do a matching exercise to the Galatians fruit of the Spirit, we've got love, which is the very first one. Joy, patience is up there, kindness is up there, goodness, it doesn't delight in evil, it celebrates righteousness, gentleness, kind of the kind, faithfulness, self-control. There's so many links in there that when we're talking about a way of love and a way of living in love, you're talking about displaying the fruits of the Spirit. It is life in the Spirit that gives you a life that is characterized by love. It is receiving the love of God that allows you to display the love of God in your life in the way that 1 Corinthians is talking about. We are commanded to love God. Love God and love one another. That's what Jesus says is the greatest commandment. And the only way we can do that is by receiving God's love first. We know what love is because he loved us first. That's what it says in 1 John. It also says God is love. So if you're not sure about that personification of Jesus is love, it's very clear when you look elsewhere in the New Testament. How do we love God then? How do we show him patience? How do we not envy God? How are we not angered by God? How do we not keep records of God's wrongs? That's a strange one, right? And I think the answer is that Jesus says to his disciples, whenever you feed or clothe or whenever you love the weak and vulnerable, you are loving me. And so we do that by loving one another. We do it by loving people outside the church as well. We love his children in order to love him. But there's also a warning here for us that if you do all these things without love, then you're worthless, is what it says. If I stand up and give the best preach, but I do it because it makes me look good, it's worthless. If we lead worship, if we serve on a team in church, but actually we're constantly annoyed by the people around us and we do it grumbling and griping all the way through, it's worthless. It has no value. That's what Paul says. It's quite a challenge, I think. Just think the best thing that you've ever done, if you did it for the wrong reasons, if it was self-seeking, then it's worthless. And so motivation that runs through everything is what this is about. This has to be our primary base that we build everything on top of. And it's about life in the Spirit. And the way that we can track over time, are we growing, are we maturing, is by measuring ourselves against these things. Are we increasing in love is the question that we have to answer. And that love is the same thing as, are we being transformed by the Spirit? It's kind of more language for the same thing. And I guess the joy that I have is to stand here before you and say that we are a community of love. We've heard lots of stories of Sandy and Dougie, and there are many other stories around the room where people have shown love consistently, that we know that when people come in, they find welcome, they find community, they find friendship. And all of that is a sign that we are doing these things. So if all I've done is given you extra language and helps you think more directly about it, then be encouraged to keep going and go further, because we as a church are doing a great job on lots of these things. We are the body of Christ. We are the temple of the Holy Spirit. Therefore, we are a community of love.